Offbeat Gyan is back with the story of David Copperfield. David Copperfield is a very popular novel and it is a classic. Written by Charles Dickens, it was published in 1850. This is the cover of one of the editions of this hugely popular novel, which continues to be prescribed for students across the world. And it's a very poignant and nostalgic story. It tells about the misadventures, adventures, the pain, the sorrow, and the joy of a little boy who grows up to become an established writer. The man in picture is Charles Dickens, the author of David Copperfield. What type of novel is David Copperfield? Well, it is a Bildungsroman or a novel that tells the story of the growth of the protagonist from childhood to youth and maturity. Bildungsroman is a German term. So, what it means is coming of age. So, this novel, written by Charles Dickens, is a novel that can be put into the category of coming of age novel or Bildungsroman, and it was published in 1850. Charles Dickens is an English writer, a novelist who belongs to the Victorian period of English literature. Victorian period means when Queen Victoria was ruling over England. She came to power in 1837 and she ruled until the early part of the 20th century. So now let's delve into the story of David Copperfield. Where was David Copperfield born? David Copperfield was born in Blunderstone, Suffolk, in England. The name of the house was Rookery. David's father used to like the rooks. Rooks are a kind of birds. He used to love the rooks coming to rest in his house, and that is why the house itself was called Rookery. His father had died some months before he was born. His mother, Clara Copperfield, she was a naive and timid woman, and she was not very worldly wise, so she was easily exploited by others. A loving and kind woman, but she lacked the courage to take a stand and defend herself and her child from the difficulties of life, from evil people like Mr. Murdstone and his sister, Miss Murdstone. The maid and nurse, Clara Peggotty, both the mother and the nurse, they have the same name, Clara Copperfield, Clara Peggotty. And the lady in black, you see, that is David's aunt, Betsy Trotwood. That is, she was David Copperfield's father's aunt, and in the first chapter of the novel, she comes to visit David Copperfield's mother. David Copperfield's mother is yet to deliver the little boy, and she comes to the house and she leaves the house uh, angry because the baby that is to be born is going to be a boy and not a girl. She wanted it to be a girl, and she leaves the house and she doesn't turn back. So she is a woman with independent means. That means she had her own money. She was financially independent. She is eccentric, but she had had a tough life because her marriage was to a man who had squandered everything that he had. He was a drunkard. So life with him had been bad. And that could be one of the reasons why she hated men. But she was harsh on the outside and had a kind core because she later on in the novel we find that she takes care of David. She also takes care of a mentally slow man called Mr. Dick. She has provided refuge to him in her house. So that is about Betsy Trotwood. So when David is around 7 years old, he is sent away to Yarmouth with Peggotty, his nurse, and he's not given any reasons. It is an adventure for him. So Peggotty and David, they live, they leave for Yarmouth. And David is very intrigued when he arrives in Yarmouth and he sees the house of Mr. Peggotty. Peggotty's brother is Mr. Peggotty, and the house is a beached barge. A barge is a large boat, and so this boat has been converted into a house. This boat will no longer sail, and it is stuck on the beach, and Mr. Peggotty has converted it into a comfortable, quaint little house. This is the inside of the house, and it gives a very warm picture. The two children, David Copperfield and little Emily, then Mr. Peggotty and Ham. Then there is Mrs. Gummidge and Peggotty. Mrs. Gummidge, Ham, and Emily, they are all adopted by Mr. Peggotty. Ham and Emily are Mr. Peggotty's adopted niece and nephew, or rather, nephew and niece. And Mrs. Gummidge is an elderly widow, and she is sort of attracted to Mr. Peggotty. But as far as Mr. Peggotty is concerned, he has provided all these people refuge in his home. So it's a strange family, but they are all happy together. And David finds the warmth and joy of the house to be very good for himself. Because thus far he has lived in his house with the two Claras, with his mother and his nurse, Peggotty. So this is a very different experience for him. And David and Emily, little Emily, they spend a lot of time together. So David falls in love with little Emily, and he is also very happy that he has his own room inside the beached barge. Then David Copperfield and Clara Peggotty, they come back home, and they come back home to Blunderstone, Suffolk, and they find that Clara Copperfield has married Mr. Murdstone. He is an evil and cruel man. Life has changed for the mother and son. David was not informed by his mother that she was planning to get married to this man, and that is why she had made arrangements to send him away with Peggotty. So when he returns, he finds that there are two new people in the house, Mr. Murdstone, who is soon joined by his sister, Miss Murdstone, and they have taken over control of the household and assets. And Mrs. Copperfield does not have much say in the affairs of the house. She is intimidated by the brother and sister. So life becomes very sad and miserable for the mother and son. They used to be a happy family, a small family, but now these two people come and they have taken away all the joy of life. Mr. Murdstone begins teaching David, and he is very strict. He is a disciplinarian. He is very rude, very cruel, and this upsets the little boy and his mother. But Mr. Murdstone is unrelenting. He does not stop treating David like a pest, and he beats him and he makes him read, and he scolds him, berates him. So it is a very tough time for the mother and son. For the little boy, it's a very difficult phase. Mr. Murdstone beats up David, and he also locks up David in his room, and he forbids anyone in the household to give anything to David. And finally, what happens? One day he takes the decision that David Copperfield should be sent away from home, and he has to be put into a boarding school. He doesn't take into notice the mother's objections, he doesn't listen to anyone. So it's a very difficult and sad period in David's life and also in his mother's life, because she is very timid. She does not oppose her husband's decisions. And moreover, he is supported by his equally cruel and wild sister, Miss Murdstone. So David is sent away to a school called Salem House, and the village carrier or the coachman, it's not a proper coach. His name is Barkis, and Barkis takes him halfway. And Barkis is very interested in getting married to Peggotty. So he proposes to Peggotty through David Copperfield, and he tells David that when David meets Peggotty, he must convey the message that Barkis is willing. One of the very iconic lines from this novel. And when David leaves for Salem House, he is not allowed to spend any time with his poor mother. And it's a very sad departure for David. While Peggotty also is not allowed to meet him. Anyway, Barkis takes him in his carrier with his bits and pieces of luggage. And while they are on their way, Peggotty comes and she gives him some money. This money had been provided by David's mother to him. And Peggotty has brought it and she hands over the money to the little boy. And then he gets down from the carrier, he gets into a large carriage, a horse carriage, which will take him to his school, Salem House. So he arrives in the school and he finds that the headmaster is another cruel man, Mr. Creakle. Mr. Creakle is also very harsh. So it's a very difficult time for the little boy who is coming to terms with so many changes, difficult changes in his short life. He meets two friends here. He gets two friends here. One is the older, charming, and very handsome Steerforth, and the other one is Tommy Traddles, the good and innocent Tommy Traddles. So they take him in, and Steerforth asks for the money that David has, and David gives it to Steerforth. And Steerforth is sort of a benefactor for David at school because he is much more wiser in the ways of the school. Plus, he is handsome also. And with the money, he buys a lot of goodies, that is, tasty, delicious food and snacks. And all of them, all the kids, they sit together at night and they share the food. And the presence of Steerforth and Tommy Traddles is what makes his miserable life bearable. Because the headmaster, he makes it a point to hang a board around David's neck, probably based on the instructions that were given to him by Mr. Murdstone, the evil stepfather of David Copperfield. And he has to carry this board around his neck, and which says something like, "Don't touch me, I'll bite." And he carries this board even when he is sitting in classroom. So it's a very miserable period for David Copperfield. The only saving grace is the presence of Steerforth and Tommy Traddles. He, in between, he goes home and he finds that his mother has had a baby, and he loves the little baby, and he deeply loves his mother, but he's not allowed to spend much time with both of them. He returns to school. Some time later, another tragedy strikes David Copperfield. He learns that his mother and the new baby, both of them have died, and both are buried in the same grave. David is now all alone in the world. His mother used to call him Davy. Now he is completely alone in the world. And he goes back home and he finds that Miss Murdstone has dismissed Peggotty also. The house no longer belongs to him, and his education is stopped by Mr. Murdstone. A tragic turn of affairs. But another sad thing for David Copperfield is Peggotty getting married to Barkis. He finds himself completely alone. Peggotty moves into his home. Probably it is not about love, but Peggotty is making her future secure. She is no longer having a position at David Copperfield's former home. So, in order to secure her future, she gets married to Mr. Barkis, who has always been interested in getting married to her. And she gets married to him, and she promises David that David will always have a room in her house. And Mr. Murdstone stops his schooling and sends David to work in his wine warehouse in London. Mr. Murdstone is a man with multiple business interests, so he has a stake in a wine warehouse, and he stops David's education and sends David to that wine warehouse. David's life becomes even more miserable. He spends all his time in the warehouse washing bottles and pasting labels. So it's a very depressing and dreary life. This was a period when child labor was very common, and Charles Dickens himself had to spend some time in a blacking factory when his father was arrested and put in the debtor's prison. So it was a very depressing time for David Copperfield also. And this episode echoes the events that happened in Charles Dickens's life. So this child who was once loved and cared for now finds himself in a wine warehouse where he is forced to clean bottles and paste labels on them. A very monotonous and depressing job. Here, there is a saving grace in the form of the perpetually debt ridden but very kind and optimistic Mr. Wilkins Micawber. Mr. Wilkins Micawber is somebody who has this positive attitude and he says something will turn up. So David is provided accommodation and food at the Micawber's house. Mr. Micawber and his wife, Emma Micawber, and their children. She is the long suffering and devoted wife of Mr. Micawber. Mr. Micawber is somebody who has managed to lose all the money he had, his wife's money, and he is perpetually debt ridden. But Emma Micawber is very, very devoted to him, and she is a very determined woman. And she says, no matter what troubles I have in my life, I will never desert Mr. Micawber. David Copperfield and Emma Micawber, they become friends of a sort. And Emma is somebody who is so harassed and perpetually worried about how she will provide food for her family. So David helps her out often, and he also helps her when Micawber is sent to the debtor's prison, that is, King's Bench prison. David finds some solace in the Micawber household, and Tommy Traddles, his friend, also gets into trouble because of the help he had rendered to Mr. Micawber. Tommy loses all the money he had saved up for his future and for his marriage to his sweetheart. But later on in the novel, Micawber pays off his debt to Tommy before emigrating to Australia. The Micawbers are soon forced by their circumstances to leave London, and once again, David finds himself alone. He is lonely and in despair. He makes up his mind that he is not going to work in the factory anymore, in Murdstone's wine warehouse anymore, and he leaves London and he walks for 5 days to reach his aunt Betsy Trotwood's house in Dover. The boy reaches there completely tired and exhausted, and he meets his eccentric aunt. She's an independent woman, and she has already, as I mentioned earlier, given shelter to the mentally disabled man, Mr. Dick. She takes in David Copperfield also, but she tells him that she will inform his stepfather about his presence in her household. But she refuses to hand over David Copperfield to Mr. Murdstone. Mr. Murdstone has taken over the property, the house, everything that belonged to David. And Aunt Trotwood, she resumes David's education. He studies at a school in Canterbury, And there he meets the headmaster of the school, Dr. Strong. He is a good, kind, and beloved teacher, a complete contrast to the harsh and cruel Mr. Creakle. Soon, David completes his schooling and he joins the proctor's firm called Spenlow and Jorkins. Here, David meets his first love, Spenlow's daughter, Dora Spenlow. Mr. Spenlow does not approve of the relationship. David marries Dora, but this happens only after the death of Mr. Spenlow. Dora is very pretty and she is spoiled. And David Copperfield lives with Mr. Wickfield. Mr. Wickfield is Betsy Trotwood's lawyer. Mr. Wickfield is an alcoholic and a widower. He is looked after by his able, efficient, worldly wise, caring daughter, Agnes. Agnes and David are good friends and they grow up together. She deeply loves David, but he ignores her love for him, or at that point of time, he doesn't notice that she loves him. David works very hard because he wants to convince Mr. Spenlow that he will make a good match for Spenlow's daughter, Dora. At this point of time, he is completely and totally infatuated with Dora. He wants to win Dora, get married to her. So David goes to London on holiday and he introduces Peggotty's family to his old school friend, the rich and charming Steerforth. Little Emily, who was engaged to be married to Ham. Ham is now a boat builder. She was engaged to be married to Ham. She falls in love with the airs and graces of Mr. Steerforth and she runs away with him. She elopes with him. And Mr. Peggotty is distraught. He goes in search of her and he finds that she has been abandoned in London by the flighty Mr. Steerforth. So Steerforth comes across as a selfish and extremely shallow character, as opposed to Tommy Traddles, who is good and kind and generous. Steerforth had taken Emily to Europe and he had abandoned her there, a very selfish and cruel man. The selfless Ham, who is a boat builder by profession and much older than Emily, is a good and kind man. And he has always felt guilty that Emily deserves someone better than him. So when she elopes with Steerforth, he feels even guiltier. And he dies in an attempt to save the lives of passengers in a sinking boat. One of the passengers being Steerforth himself. That is, Ham saves Steerforth, but Ham dies in the process. Steerforth also dies. So, a complete tragedy. But it is also, this episode also is a sort of a lesson to provide the difference in character between Ham and Steerforth. Ham is a good, kind, selfless man. Steerforth is a selfish, mean, evil man. David and Dora, they get married. Agnes is saddened by the marriage, and the marriage is also not a happy marriage. Agnes had already known that it was not going to be a good match because she knew both of them very well. She knew David and she knew Dora also. Because Dora does not know how to manage a household and she does not understand anything about David, about his literary career or his interest in being a writer. And even though David tries to tell her how to manage a household, she is unable to do it because she has been brought up as a spoilt darling and she has always lived a luxurious life. So she's very bad at being a housewife or managing household finances, and this creates a sort of conflict between David Copperfield and his newly wedded wife, Dora. Dora actually spends most of her time dancing and playing with her dog, Jib. So she understands that she is incompetent and she is guilty about her lack of skills, but she's not able to address the problem. She's not able to solve the problem. Dora dies after a few years. David is sad and he goes abroad after the death of Dora. He returns only after 3 years. The main villain of the novel after Mr. Murdstone is Uriah Heep. Uriah Heep is one of the remarkable villains in English literature. He is Mr. Wickfield's apprentice or assistant who soon becomes his partner. He belongs to the working class and he cheats Wickfield and encourages Wickfield's alcoholism. Mr. Wickfield is completely ruined by Uriah Heep, who also keeps on troubling Agnes, forcing her, compelling her to marry him. But somehow or the other, Agnes keeps him away. Heep is also responsible for the loss of David's aunt's money. Ruthless and mean, he calls himself a humble man. But he is evil, he is mean, he is spiteful and revengeful, and he hates David Copperfield. Mr. Micawber, who becomes Heap's clerk, exposes his fraudulent activities and thus Heap is sent to prison. Heap is also responsible for an armed robbery. David realizes the true love of Agnes and he marries her, and they have several children. He continues his literary career and he becomes famous. The Micawbers and the complete Peggotty family, all of them, they emigrate to Australia and a new life. So that is how the story of David Copperfield concludes. It is a novel which begins when David Copperfield is an infant and it goes on to the point where he becomes successful in his literary career. That is why it is a novel of coming of age. It belongs to the genre of Bildungsroman literature. Thank you and have a nice week. Thank you once again.